Hello, everyone. Welcome to my cursed conlang. I don't really know what I'm gonna say here. One, I got lazy. A lot of procrastination went into this project, really. I was originally gonna have like a character type thing that I drew to make this more exciting, but no, you get basic presentation slides with screenshots on them, and this is gonna be crappy. I don't know what's more cursed, to be honest, the conlang or the presentation you're about to see. So anyway, let's continue on. The name of the conlang is R.W.M.T.B.B, or what it actually stands for is Rules Were Made to Be Broken. The conlang's concept and idea here. Actually, do I have another slide for that? Oh yeah, okay. The idea behind the conlang is that it is a conlang designed on inconsistency, breaking normal rules of linguistics, and generally the idea is that this conlang is very unnatural, horrible, and an actual disaster. And the fact of the matter is, I made it so much of a disaster. I didn't even fully finish it, really, because the orthography. You know what? I'll get onto that later. But what's important here is just that this conlang is essentially a design train wreck. And it train wrecked. It did do that. Anyway, let's continue on. We're on to the phonology. I thought I had more introducing it, but apparently not. So let's just go on. So we have the vowels here. Those do not look like vowels. I think anyone can look at that and say, those are not vowels. And you'd be correct. These are the least sonorant vowels I could possibly imagine. I'll go ahead and pronounce them all and try to pronounce most of the phonemes for you in the conlangs, at least once, because at the end I will not be pronouncing the sentence because that would be literally lethal. Please do mind that I have a stuffy nose, so that might mess some of this up. So first we have the interdental stop here. It's unreleased and syllabic and all that. So we got that's the first vowel, and then we have the palatoalveolar stop, unreleased whatever vowel, which is going to be and then we have a postpalatal constricted fricative vowel. Isn't that nice? That'd be something like what? Something like that. And then finally we have a pharyngeal stop vowel, which would be like, there you go. Lovely. And those are the vowels. So this is going wonderful. Not very symmetric, quite small, and that's going to and then we have this. It has zero symmetry here is the phonology of the consonants. Zero symmetry, mostly POAs that are very uncommon, but some common mixed in, and they're just horrendous. The most normal sound here is probably going to end up being the uvular nasal that's voiceless. Yeah, I think that's probably the most normal thing. I mean, we have to note, I think I added an extra note for this, which we'll get to in a second, but so let's just go ahead and run through them. We have the uvular voiceless nasal here, which is so it's not very loud. Yeah, it's pretty much silent. That's lovely. Then we have the post-uvular near close approximant, which would be what? Something like that maybe was what it would be. I'm not actually quite sure. At one point I knew what everything here was supposed to sound like, and after that it's gone downhill. I don't really know, man. Then we have the tacholinguolabial fricative, which is oh wait, that's supposed to be creaky voice. I forgot. So that's and then we have the apico-uvular approximant. Then we have the gutturally-released fricative, labio-alveolar gutturally-released fricative. Then we have the exolabial click, backed with a pharyngeal something. I don't know. Something like that, maybe. Maybe. Lingolabial frenum, lateral fricative. So that's fla. Fla. Then we have the retroflex click trill. There we go. Got it. Then we have the glottal voiced trill, which is, of course, just which is possibly the most sonorant sound in the language. Then we have the lingobuccal rub, which is fun. I don't even know if you can hear that. Then we have the fricated approximant, the subapicodental fricated approximant, which is maybe something like that. I don't know. That one's hard. I don't think I can actually do this fricated trill apicopalatal. I'm pretty sure it's possible. I just can't do it at the moment, so I'm not even gonna give it a try. And then there's the percussive release click, which is apicovelar. This one's fun. It's there you go. So that's the consonants. Now, if we continue on, we have consonants with unofficial IPA. I'm going to go ahead and describe it. I created a symbol, which is a little superscript R for describing that that's trilled. I think I forgot to put the minus under it for it to be post, and that's going to continue across all of this, so please keep that in mind. Then we have the linguobuccal rub, which also uses this symbol that I designed. Normally I just use an asterisk for these, but since I was working with, since I have multiple of them and might transcribe with them, it was best to give them their own symbols to use. So this is the symbol I gave the linguobuccal rub. This is the symbol I gave Joe, as my community likes to call it, the labio-alveolar guttural-least fricative. I gave it this symbol, and then we have the taco lingolabial symbol here, where I put a taco after it to describe the use taco tongue, which is like where you fold your tongue up into like a taco shape while you're producing the lingolabial. Continuing on, we have larynx. We have other distinctions. We have the larynx distinction, normal larynx, like ah, versus lower larynx, which is like what? Oh, I think that's right. Then we have length distinctions for vowels and consonants. We have extra short ah, we have short ah, we have half long ah, we have long ah, and then we have extra long ah, or something like that. Now, I'm going to actually go ahead and note that for long, I actually didn't have a notation for it originally. I think there's only one example of long in the entire conlang I made. I didn't actually originally have a symbol for long. I forgot to make one. So it ended up being that long got some extra notation. So it's not actually very well put into the conlang, but it's whatever. We also have extraneous noises, which can just be randomly displaced throughout words, which is a clap or two snaps on both hands, which is to note. So phonology part 6, we have the syllable structure. So most of the syllables are VC, which is kind of breaking the rules, because normally syllables normally this is like not a very common type of syllable. I think it might exist sometimes, but normally you would have an onset before you get a coda. So you don't normally have a coda but no onset. And then you have, except a fourth syllable, of course there's exceptions, except for a fourth syllable can be CVVC, where it's, of course, I don't need to really explain that. And any syllable whose ordinal is in the Fibonacci sequence can be CCVCC, except the first, second, and 13th syllable. Now, we don't have words that are really long. I think the longest word is 5 syllables, so we don't ever get that high. Notably, we have these extra rules for other syllable structures so that think consonants can be in onsets, but it's more rare. Next, we have stress, which I never really mention after this, so this is just a one-time mention. So I don't really worry about it after this point. A stressed syllable's voice switches, making voiceless voiced and voiced voiceless, and creaky voice becomes breathy voice. Ignores rubs and clicks. Also ignores half-long phonemes if they are in a non-VC syllable. It can be a VC syllable if the consonant is Joe. You can try and process all this. It's a lot of information, and honestly, since it's not going to really ever be referred to again, it's not too important to remember. Continuing on, there's more regarding stress. Stress lands on the syllable roughly 2/5 of the way through, unless there's a non-VC syllable, where it lands on the syllable roughly 4/7 of the way through, or if there's an extra long phoneme on the syllable, roughly 2/5 or 4/7, where it moves onto the syllable after, even if it is extra long, unless the syllable roughly 4/7 of the way through is the last syllable in which it goes to the second syllable. Stress, which I don't really think that would happen ever, but anyway, stress is ignored on one syllable words if they are adjectives, adverbs, or articles. Also, if they are a noun following another noun. I don't think I have any examples of articles in the conlang, so that one's not really important. So you could try to process all of these rules with stress if you really want to, but I don't really apply stress after this. Again, I didn't end up having time to do an IPA transcription. And there are some for some words, but it doesn't apply stress because I just frankly didn't have the time and energy to do so. Anyway, into the nightmarish orthography that really just burned the entire conlang to the ground after I made it. This thing, oh boy, here we go. So there are two systems. There's the Japo-Latin system, used Japanese and Latin characters to create a romanization of sorts. And then there's the official writing system, the conlang, which is going to have minimal use after I show it, which is the actual writing system of the language. This uses custom symbols, so I actually made symbols. Continuing on, we have Japo-Latin section 1. I'm not going to talk about too much, but we have the rules here. We have the sounds, and then we have the symbol. So these are all the sounds this symbol can represent, and these are the rules for doing so. Now, there are a lot, so let's just kind of roughly mention some things here. One thing is the character K is a vowel. Well, U could be a vowel or a consonant. We also have certain vowel symbols like this here, which represents a consonant instead of a vowel. Sometimes vowels represent vowels, sometimes consonants represent vowels, sometimes vowels represent consonants. So it's kind of what's going on here. So I'm not going to go into much detail. So is probably the most complicated rule, and it can be literally any vowel, and you can go ahead and try to read this break of text if you so desire. We have K, which this, besides just excluding in letters or numbers, the rule is broken inside of affixes as well. And of course, these two are kind of opposites to each other in here. There's a lot of rules to follow. I'm going to kind of mostly go over those quickly because I don't want to spend too much time. Also, O is a silent character, which does almost nothing in the conlang besides one particular case where it's used. So let's continue on. Also, to mention, Y is a character which has a pairing, F, and these two are only used in certain writing directions. Now we'll get into that in a bit because we haven't really discussed the writing directions yet, but they are opposites to each other, so they'll be used in opposite cases, which I actually don't think I ended up doing in the final transcription, which is kind of a mistake on my part, but you know what? We've already gotten this far into the recording. I am not going back now. Anyway, we have D here as well, which is the one where O is used, and so O can change it. By surrounding it with O's, it can change its pronunciation sometimes. We also have characters where words can't be used or letters can't be used in certain words in certain cases, like this. B has this pairing version of T where it will be replaced in certain cases. T also has its own cases where it can be used, but I don't think I ever used T outside of the cases with B. And there are certain characters in this list that aren't ever actually used and don't have any examples, sadly. So, anywho, so I don't really think there's much else I want to really mention in here. Let's continue on. Of course, we have certain notations in regards to this. So this is one of the ones I don't think I ever actually used, which is for onsets of a syllable, or if it is the last character, this thing can represent this sound, the taco sound. And this one, like, there's certain cases which are actually really weird, where it's characters kind of have a weird loophole where it's not clear how they should be pronounced. And I kind of just have to deal with that. This is one of those examples. I think there was another example earlier as well. So we have this Q character and some characters now for marking length and larynx height, and these are the extraneous noises, which again just get placed in random words. Anyway, we can continue on. This is the last writing for a consonant, which is this rare writing of that click in long words. I don't think it's too rare, technically, really, in the end, but it's kind of rare. So we have the KGS, can make any IPA sound, but can only be used in borrowed words, and blah, blah, blah. So these are borrowed word sounds, which borrowed words, I didn't do enough, I think, with borrowed words, but borrowed words are essentially words that kind of break the rules of the phonology system a bit, and these are some of the characters that can do certain special things and have special pronunciations in those borrowed words. We also have stuff that regards to sentences, which you'll see this thing that says by some word orders. We'll get more into that later, but it is very complicated. There's also the 7 character, which is very important for sentences. And then some other grammatical things you can see here. You can go ahead and read all these grammatical things if you're really interested. Some of them will be used, some of them won't be. Onward, a brief look at the official writing system, because I don't really want to go too deep into this, but it's essentially just going to be a list of pairings of characters that are in the Japo-Latin system and how you write them in the official one. So you can go ahead and read all of these if you so desire, but I am not going to go ahead and really go into them. But you can see that the system is really all over the place, and it's kind of interesting. Anyway, we're on to word orders. Yes, plural word order changes a sentence's meaning. This is something really interesting I employed here, which is the fact you actually have multiple word orders that could be used for a sentence, and depending on which one you choose, the ending marker, as you saw earlier, be different, and it changes the actual meaning, certain parts of the meaning of a sentence. Now, I used a few of these. I don't know if I used them perfectly. I'm pretty sure that in my final translation that I actually made some mistakes. So in the end, it is what it is. This conlang is actual disaster and monster to try and translate with, and that's kind of why I procrastinated some, especially that orthography. Oh my goodness. Anyway, SVO is to give an example, SVO. I also give very literary descriptions for some of these for funsies due to the kind of themes and stuff that were optional. One of them was like a story or whatever, so I decided to make some literary definitions throughout this that are used. For example, we have SVO, and it's a consideration, a truth, a fact, something as simple to see as the red color of an apple, bringing order and knowledge to chaos and the unknown. So, you have that, right? And this is its symbol over here. So you kind of have to figure out what on earth any of these mean. You have to figure out what on earth these literary definitions are meaning, because it's as good as guess. Anyone's guess is as good as any here. Like, some of these are horrendous to try and understand. But I did use a few of these, so we can go ahead and more quickly go through some. You'll notice some of them don't actually have all types of words in them. Some of them don't have those definitions, because again, there's a lot of inconsistency I tried to put into this conlang. So there you go. That is all of them if you truly want it. Also, voice was in there if you didn't notice. So you have middle voice and passive voice. I don't actually use either of those, and I maybe should have, but oh well. Anyway, it's time for syntax. So let's go on. Syntax reading direction. First line can be read left to right or right to left, marked by starting the sentence with a 7 symbol. Whatever the last word was in a line states the rule for the next line's reading direction. You'll see this in the dictionary. There's a whole column for it. Only letter order changes with reading directions. The characters are not mirrored. So that's saying the A character is still going to be A in either direction. It's just which way the words are being spelled out. And unlike in I think old Latin script, the characters are actually mirrored when you write them the other way. Anyway, syntax part 2, adjective order. Adjectives go before what they modify, unless the number of modifiers on the following grammar word, S, V, or O. Actually, there's more types. I actually don't exactly follow this way of doing it, but is a perfect square, perfect cube. That means if examples of perfect squares and perfect cubes, 0, 1, 4, 8, 9, and really nothing above that really matters, because again, it'd be pretty hard to get that many modifiers. And I think I kind of counted affixes as part of modifiers in my actual translation, but I think it technically would include adverbs and adjectives, but I kind of messed that up as well, because honestly, I wrote this over the course of a long time, and then I just forget what things mean. And only now am I starting to fully remember how this conlang works. So the translation is probably slightly off from the original intention, and you're just going to have to put up with it. As I said, I think I made several mistakes with it. Anyway, following on syntax, adverb and adposition order. Adverbs go the opposite way to adjectives and look at the previous grammar word. So instead of looking at the next one coming up, it looks at the one that was before. And the same rules apply, except for it's negated. So if an adjective would go before, an adverb will go after. And so adposition's order depends on the word. That means that every adposition has their own ordering thing that it'll say how it's ordered, if it goes before or after and whatnot. To continue on, we have noun and verb formation. Nouns and verbs, unless they are barred words or among some exceptions, are adjectives and adverbs, respectively marked with affixes. I thought this rule would be absolutely nonsensical and just be a pain, and in fact it kind of was. But it was an interesting rule to add to the conlang because it kind of breaks the common principles you would see in most languages, where it's actually the opposite of this, where there's a lot of adjectives and adverbs which are just marked versions of other words. So it kind of went for that there. Syntax part 5, adposition types. So this is a long list of every single type of adposition. I actually don't really want to read them all out, but it's a mess. There's also this minus character which is used, which is kind of weird because they never mentioned it in Japo-Latin or official writing system, but it's actually just like a slash hyphen character that just exists, and it's used in some affixes and here with adpositions. So a quick covering before affixes. You'll see these pop up in the affixes. We'll have a B middle, which is before the middle, is the syllable before the middle of the word. Actually, did I? Okay, yeah, I include them both. So this is before the middle syllable, before the middle of a word, the syllable before the middle of a word. So you'll mark the middle of a word if it's an even number this is easy because the two of them just go next to each other. I think technically in the case of, it kind of gets a little weird with odd ones. Technically, these might just go around the middle syllable, but I don't think I actually applied it that way. These would be the syllables around that. Right, yes, yeah, it's complicated. I don't feel like explaining it right now. This minus S means to remove a particular syllable. There are cases where you'll be removing syllables. This asterisk next to a hyphen means the hyphen is left in. As I mentioned before, you'll still have that slash symbol. Amid is similar to this, except for it's the syllable after the middle of the word, and duplord means a duplicated version of the root. So whatever the original word was will be duplicated. Anyway, continuing on, these are the cases. So we have the dative, locative, ablative, limitive, substitutive, and transitive. I actually forgot what the transitive case meant, and to be honest, I don't think it would have been used anyway, but I did forget what it means, sadly. So we have dative, and of course, so part of what I did was I looked at the hierarchy of cases. I don't know if you all know this, but there's a hierarchy where normally certain cases, a case will only exist if these other cases before it exists, and that's kind of how it works. Well, these are cases these kind of break that order, and that's kind of what I did for some of these. And other ones are cases that were marked on the list of grammatical cases on Wikipedia as red, so I decided to add them because they're rare. And I think there's also just some random case I just decided to add as well. And this is I have all of these filled out, so you can look at all of the affixes. And then we have moods. There's only 3 moods. You have the interrogative, hypothetical, and potential moods, which are marked. Any other moods, again, similar to, and with cases as well, any others are just unmarked. So you just don't get to see them. But in these cases, you do have them marked. I don't know if I ever marked any of these moods, because I don't think I needed to, but we have affix form 1 and rare form. Anyway, mild innervation. I hate the orthography of this conlang. After I made it, the orthography was so painful and horrific to use that it stunted the entire progress of the conlang, and so many things are left unfinished simply because the process of using this was so painful. Eventually, I was using like random wheels to create words and things like that because it was just so hard and painful. And so certain rules end up being broken across it, and it's just a mess. But I absolutely hated it, and it definitely was part of like what went wrong with the process of making this conlang. Anyway, continuing on, we have the aspects for affixes. So we have aspects. I didn't finish most of these. I only have one added here, and I think that's the only aspect that's ever used. No, I should probably explain what this means in particular. This means that it's an infix for after the second syllable. Of course, if there's no second syllable, it goes to the first syllable, right? And this is the first, and then fix it after the first syllable, things like that. So you can see certain ones. Now I can go back to these where you can see some of these more clearly. This is the duplifix, so this would go in between the duplicate words. We have this where you'd remove the third syllable, and then you would put this after the third syllable. So essentially this is replacing it, so it's a simulfix. Anyway, we can continue on. This is number, so count. Again, I didn't finish all these affixes, but there are some here. And these are the different ways you can mark counts. You have general, which can be marked. You have singular, 3, 5, or 8. That's the number. You can mark it with these affixes. 6 or 9 have these. More than 14 but less than 156 have these affixes, and anything else has these, since there's no plural affix. This essentially works like a plural, and you just gotta deal with it. And then there's this. Now, I didn't actually mention this, which I probably should have. I keep forgetting things. There's affix forms. Now, you'll get more into what these mean later, but affix forms are essentially meaning different words will use different rows, different types of affix forms, depending on what word they are. And so here we have common or uncommon. This just means that these are the more common affix form, and this is the more uncommon affix form. Anyway, then we have gender. Rest in peace, because I actually messed some things up later, and so gender really never really got added correctly. I didn't even finish filling in what type of affix these all were, so this is like really unfinished. So yeah, this is kind of just a mess, and sadly, this part never really got fully integrated. Sadly, I made this one, but it's never used. Continuing on, we have tenses. So affixes part 6, we have tenses. I never actually finished all the types of affixes, but you could say I made 2 of them, which are used in the translation. That's the ones that I finished. For all the ones that I didn't fully complete is this. So we have positive, negative, both for these tenses. And you can see I use sometime, anytime, no time, every time, that time, those times, which means that you kind of just have these like vague senses of time instead of having precise past, present, or future, stuff like that. These kind of imply an aspect as well onto it, which is a little bit odd. So you get some really weird things. You get the positive of it, the negative of it, which if you think about it, these are kind of just like opposites to each other, so it's a little weird. But anyway, that's what I did for tense. So interesting. Both would mean that it's combined state of positive and negative. It's a little weird. But yeah, this is clearly not a normal sense of, this clearly is breaking the normal senses of tense. And I just figured this was like really breaking away from the norm, which is kind of the idea here. Then we have the, of course, aforementioned adverb to verb affixes, which are affixes for making an adverb become a verb. I actually finished this. This is another thing I ended up finishing, so you can see what types we have. We have a pseudo suffix, we have an infix, infix, and simulfix here. Borrowed means for borrowed words, which I think borrowed was used earlier as well. Anyway, we also have adjective to noun affixes, which I didn't actually finish, but we have a few of them here. Again, normal versus borrowed, and we have this. Continuing on, we have CPN, or circumfix Polish notation. Some of you may have heard of Polish notation, where you, or normal Polish notation, where you put the operator before the operand. So instead of, say, A plus B, you would say plus AB. And then there's, I think, I don't know what it's called, if it's RPN or what it is, but there's one for when you do it after, so it'd be AB plus. Well, this is CPN, circumfix Polish notation, where it would be plus AB plus. Now, this is specifically going to be used for, what are they? Oh my gosh, I forgot the word. These. So these operators of and, or, or XOR. So you have normal and the not versions of them. So nan, nor, and XOR. Operators go around this. So instead of saying something like Tom and Martha, you'd say and Tom, Martha, and, which is really fun. And I figured this is really clunky and awful, and so I decided to add it. And you will get to see this one later. I only actually made the word for and because that's the only one used in the final translation. Wowza, we got pronouns. Let's continue on. I didn't finish the pronouns. Big surprise, this is becoming a reoccurring theme. You can see more of the gender system popping up here. So for the first, we have neuter, which neuter wasn't really well defined. I couldn't figure out if I wanted it to be an ungendered object or like gender neutral. And you also have second or third and first or third. So there's no way to notate solely second or solely third here, but there's first. But you'll notice a negative, negate, which is used with another pronoun, which means if you used the negate of the first with first or third, you would get third person. But if you used the negate of the first or third with the second or third, you would get the negative. You'd still have that negative first kind of thing on there, but it'd probably just be taken to mean second person. But I didn't end up fully, I never really end up using this, and I just end up using second or third here, which means it's technically ambiguous whether or not later things mean second or third person. You just contextually have to figure that out. Then you have this neuter one here as well for other. Now, other I ended up using for notating the word my, because I had no other way of notating it. This is cool. So we have all kinds of wacky things here to distinguish. Anyway, we're continuing on. We have the number system. The numbers are written as their sequence. They just meant as their sequence of prime factors. This would be akin to 10 being written as 2, 5. For rational numbers, all numbers after a point are inverse factors. So a half is 1.2 factors in order least to greatest, same right of dot. So yeah, and you can look at every single symbol I have for the number system here. I'm not going to really go into it, but a lot of these are really random and painful. And you can write a lot of numbers, but there's still a lot of numbers you can't write. All the numbers up to something. I don't remember what all the numbers. All the numbers at least up to 293 can all have a way of writing them. The system is kind of awful, but you kind of just have to deal with it. So these symbols are the numbers. So it's similar to, like, I think Old Greek or Hebrew. I think they did something like this as well, where the letters would also be numbers. And similarly here, and I think French maybe uses a similar system with this multiplication. I don't know. The prime factor thing sounds really cool, but with the way that it's done, it's just a pain in the butt. Luckily, all our numbers never get bigger than 3, so this is pretty easy. Anyway, rule set explanation. Before we get into the dictionary and all of that, I need to explain the rule set. And this goes back into affix forms. So a rule set dex is what forms of affixes a word uses depending on some factor. For example, detail of word order or type of word it's acting as. So there are different conditions for which one of these dex numbers is going to be using. And then you have which forms. Now, this is where why gender ended up being kind of nixed. It's because I forgot to put the form for gender in. And since I forgot to put the form for gender in, there never ended up being gender. Now, there's actually a lot of forms here that just never, like certain things in here that just never actually got used. Even if they popped up in words, that exact condition was never met. And see 0, 1, 2, 3, 3R4, all this. Anyway, we can continue on now that you know that to the dictionary. For the entire dictionary, I'm going to give you the whole dictionary because I'm not going to use these actual definitions in the final translation. So you're going to need to know them if you want the real definitions. So you can see the horrendous words. Some of them do get transcribed without stress over here. For the most part, they don't. You also have the word type. You can see that different add positions will be notated with their type of add position here. You have if they're borrowed, you have the rule set dex conditions, so you could have it as, if the syllable is in the word order is what's first starting it, then you'd use this rule, but verb does it, it's this rule, and so on. And it could be always, it could be if it's an adjective or a noun used with odds. So this is the case for use on an ordinal number to make an ordinal. If it's used with odds or used with evens, it's different numbers. You also have the line direction change, as I mentioned before. The last word determines the rule for how the thing changes. So it could be right to left next, it could be left to right. Switch direction, it could be same direction. You could use the rules of a prior word as well. And then there's these definitions. Again, you have some literary, some not literary definitions. I mean, you just have some fun reading through these. Again, I don't want to go through too much detail in a lot of this stuff. So this is really all you're going to get to see, so you can continue on. If you want to read every single thing here, you can go ahead and do so. Again, I'm not trying to give every single detail of this conlang read out, since it would take forever with all the random chaos in this conlang. So you can see this one actually has 2 definitions. You have definition 1, definition 2. That's an interesting detail. And these are the last words that I used. Now, there's also copulas in the language. Now, you can see where I merge certain cells where the copulas were going to be the same word. You can kind of look at that and get some ideas of how it's going to be. So copulas have their number, general singular, these things, other, and then they have their tense, of course, as well. Subject minus object number. I really don't apply this much. I honestly forgot about this rule. Again, another mistake in my translation. But it's supposed to be the amount, the count, if you take the subject and minus the amount from the object. So, and there's also a dropping rule. Copula is dropped, the subject or object is borrowed unless there's 10% or less borrowed words in the sentence, which means you would need at least 10 words in a sentence and only one of them being borrowed in the drop case. and that word that's dropping it being the only one borrowed, for example, for it to not drop the copula, in which case the copula is just removed. The word is not included in the sentence, which means it's completely up to the reader to presume what on earth was being said, which is really awful. You have, of course, also the positive, negative, or both for the tenses. Anyway, we can continue on. Let's go into names and then into letter and number names. So for names, a name ignores syllable rules for phonetics and will use whatever letters exist in the Japanese letter writing system for that name. For example, Bob can keep all letters, but Zion can't because Z and I. So most of these letters don't have their own pronunciations, whereas Bob, all of them have their own pronunciations. If in the name the unreplaceable letter lands on an even ordinal, it will be replaced with SL, the original sound. If the name is if in the name the unreplaceable letter lands on an odd prime ordinal, it will be replaced with LB and used unborrowed pronunciation. So you can see there's some interesting rules for what pronunciation to be used and stuff. And then we have some exceptions. You can go ahead and read them. These exceptions are absolutely heinous. And then we have some examples here. So Bob is therefore written the same, still written as Bob, pronounced like this, which is horrid. Zion, my name, is written as well, it looks like Slossel or something, but it's pronounced Ein. Extra example is Edward, because that's in the translation, is written as what looks like Dward and pronounced as this absolute abomination. Continuing on, we have letters and numbers, and these names were never actually finished. So you'll see these Kas and MWs a lot. Ka would be the first, and I was going to add something after, and MW would have been the second, and I would have added something before. You can see some of them are finished, though, and I did do some of them. It looks like the number name for you is the same as the pronoun from earlier, if you remember that. So, yeah, you get this, where we have the names for some of them. Again, we're only going to really need these names right here for the first few numbers. Anyway, finally, we can get on to the translation. Huzzah! We IPA and natural writing system not included because I am lazy and I never want to ever have to do that transcription because that would be actual heck. For how many characters this is, to actually figure that all out would be actual pain and misery. So as a exercise for the reader, if you want, you can go back and try to use the writing system and the IPA stuff and figure it out and figure out how it's actually pronounced. I'm not going to be pronouncing it, of course, either. And here you go. Several mistakes probably have been made throughout this because this conlang is so dang complicated that it's hard to remember every rule and whatnot and exceptions and everything like that to figure out exactly how the sentence morphs and changes in unexpected ways. We can see this heinous Japo-Latin writing system. Honestly, it looks kind of cool. You can see these arrows are used to indicate when it's left to right or right to left. And then I have a gloss down here, which is rough because I'm not very good at glossing, where you can try to make sense of what I wrote. And of course, feel free to pause to really grasp the translation, the first part of the translation, and then here's the second part to finish it. And honestly, I'm kind of happy with this. Like, even though this conlang is an absolute train wreck, I don't even think I put I think it's the last page I put. Yeah, I don't have an conclusion page. So, even though this was an absolute train wreck of a conlang, and train wreck of a presentation, and I think the concept was good. I did a lot of things right. I just couldn't finish it because I did it so well. It was so cursed I couldn't finish my project correctly. And then I end up breaking tons, like messing it up with the translation a bit and all kinds of nonsense. But hopefully you've enjoyed this adventure, even though I have zero shot at actually winning the contest here. Anyway, everyone, as always, thanks for watching.